Welcome to Emotional Intelligence with Style. This material comes from the fourth chapter of my book. The chapter was entitled, Do You Ruin Everything by Being You? I've long been interested in style and the way that it impacts the way that we communicate and interact with one another. In fact, recently, my wife asked me to take a DISC profile, which I did, and I was somewhat shocked that the report was 54 pages long. This will be a whole lot simpler, trust me. So maybe just quickly a little bit about me. My name's John Stoker. I'm the CEO and founder of DialogueWORKS and the author of the book Overcoming Fake Talk. I also write monthly for magazines like Entrepreneur, Smart Brief on Leadership Inc., HR.com, and others. I have over 20 years experience in leadership, dialogue, emotional intelligence, and conflict resolution. Enough of that. Let's talk about my friend Storm and Norman. So I was teaching a real talk class, and this gentleman, actually that's him, was in class, and we hadn't been going about 3 minutes when he raised his hand and said, can I ask a question? And I go, sure. Well, can you tell me why my manager made me take this class? I go, I don't know. Well, she said that you would fix me. I go, I don't know about that. And I continued on with the class, and about 3 minutes later, he blurted out, I noticed there's little numbers at the end of sentences in your manual. I assume that those are footnotes. Where's the footnote page? So I told him, if you go to page 212, you'll find them. Another 5 minutes later, he just blurted out again, are you sure you don't know what I need to do to fix me, or what you can do to fix me? And by that time I said, well, I don't know, but I think I'm starting to get an idea. And everyone laughed, but he didn't laugh. And I said, so, let me watch you and we'll talk. Now, at the end of my webinar, we'll talk a little bit about what style this gentleman is exhibiting. And he continued with his little outbursts, his little questions, until on the first break I had a chance to pull him aside and talk to him about how I'd like him to kind of follow the ground rules for taking the class. So here's the thing. Everybody has a different style of communicating. I'd like you to become aware of what those styles are and gain some kind of an awareness today of what your primary style and your secondary styles are. Your primary style is the style you were born with. Your secondary style is a style you've learned to adapt to get along and play well with others. I hope that you can learn to adapt or match your styles with the styles of others. And a fourth thing I want you to see how these different styles have different expectations. And because we don't often get clear on what those expectations are, we violate one another's expectations. So that's where we're going. So what is conversation? I recently looked up conversation, and the third definition is what showed up on the internet. The oral exchange of ideas, opinions, observations, feelings, and experiences. And below that, it said archaic conduct or behavior. And I want you to know that I believe that nothing could be further from the truth. So when I first looked up what conversation was in terms of a definition, that big old fat 8-inch Oxford English dictionary, the first definition was the act of living, associating, and dealing with others. The second definition was conduct or behavior towards others. It wasn't until the third definition that we got this oral or written exchange of ideas, thoughts, opinions, feelings, and experiences. And I thought that was telling, because conversation really not only includes the things that we say, but also the things that we do, the way that we treat other people. And I'm a firm believer that you can't take that out of it. You'll see why shortly. This is our real conversation framework for holding any difficult conversation. So if you're familiar with my work, you know that we teach people how do you initiate, discover, connect, and build. We're not going to talk about that today. But notice these are verbs. And what we did is we changed the verbs when we're talking about styles to nouns. So we have the initiator, the builder, the connector, and the discoverer. Let me talk just briefly about these and then we'll get into more detail. The initiator, which makes up about 12% of the population, is the type A personality who wants to get to it yesterday. Okay? The builder is made up of about 19% of the population. These folks are more flamboyant, they love appreciation, they love recognition. The connector is the quiet type. 39% of the population are connectors. They like everyone to get along. They like peace and harmony. They love to work together. The discoverer is the analytical type. 30% of the population are discoverers. They're often quiet. They ask a lot of questions. They're analyzing things constantly. And obviously, they love to get things right. So if you grab that little link I put in the chat, you can go get the assessment that will help you determine what it is that you are. So when I was in college and took a communications class, they actually said there were 3 channels of communication: vocal, visual, and verbal. And I thought, wait a minute, there's a mental aspect as well. In fact, the mental aspect, quite frankly, drives the other 3. So if I was angry with one of you, wouldn't my anger or frustration drive what I would do vocally, visually, and verbally? I absolutely believe that it would. So you got to know that when you're trying to identify either your style or somebody else's styles, you got to pay attention to the 3 C's. The first one is consistently. If you watch your own behavior, what are the kind of things that you do consistently? And then you want to look at context. So I'll be honest, I am much, much different when I'm teaching a class than when I'm working in the office, than when I'm actually interacting with my children. In fact, I'll often change up my style based on the specific child. And then you want to watch clusters of behavior. So all this stuff about, oh, if somebody crosses their arms, that means they're closed. That's just one behavior. That may not mean they're closed. It may mean they're cold, or it may mean they've stood up all day and their back is hurting. And so they're balancing the weight of their body by putting their arms on their chest. So when we talk about clusters, you'll learn the clusters today. I want you to look at a whole bunch of different behaviors that will help you to identify what a person is. Now you got to know that your brain is always making what we call natural assessments. The guy that did this research got a Nobel Peace Prize for it. He was a gentleman by the name of Daniel Kahneman. And so he would say that your body is always assessing, size. Is he or she bigger than me? How close are they? Just proximity. Volume, how loud are they? And that's because volume is often interpreted as aggression. Tempo, how fast is he or she talking? Are they relaxed? Casual? What's their body movement? What are they doing with their arms, with their feet? Tone, what's the message in their tone? Mood, what are they feeling? What feelings are they demonstrating? Openness, are they receptive or not? Now, the reason that your brain is constantly scanning the environment, asking these questions, it's obviously to keep you safe. And if it says, not safe, then they're saying, watch out. Well, part of what we're doing has to do with our style. So our brain is actually assessing if another person's style is in fact a threat to us. So here's some things you need to know about how our brain works. Our brains are actually wired to connect with others through the use of what we call mirroring neurons. Those neurons are out there trying to connect with the neurons of another person. Now, here are the 2 important principles about style. People will reflect their style to you. Now, the woman who works for me, who's my grammar expert, she's always telling me she thinks I should change that word reflect to project. And you could take that if you wanted. But being an old river guide, the first thing you learn about running the river is that the water is always a reflection on the surface of what's underneath. So a person's style is really a reflection of what's going on in their head. And the second principle is that people will reflect your reflection back to you. You might try this today. If you went to Smith's or Walmart and you're walking around, just look to make eye contact with people. If you smile at them, go, hey, you know, what do you think will happen? They'll smile back and say, hey, back. That's that principle. So what's interesting is you're projecting a style, but at the same time, people will reflect or project your style back to you. So if you can recognize, reflect back to others' reflection, what ends up happening is it increases engagement, personal connection, and will increase rapport. And part of the reason that happens is because the person's brain is telling, hey, they're safe, they're just like us. Okay, so let's talk about these styles one at a time. So we're going to talk about the initiators. So just note, in each of these slides I'm going to show you, the first check or point deals with a person's mental kind of emphasis. So these guys want results and action. Vocally, the way they speak is forceful and direct. They're often accused of being cold, too direct, too forceful. They will speak quickly and emphatically. That's their vocal characteristics. Visually, they'll make direct eye contact. They never have to look away. They have no space limitation. They can get right up nose to nose, and they'll use gestures like pointing, chopping, and the like to make a point. Verbally, here's the kind of words they use. Hey, man, I need it ASAP. Just do it. Well, is it yes or no? Complete it. Don't waste my time. The bottom line is results. Get it done. What's your purpose? What should we do? Action. We got to win. We got to beat them. Now, the reason I put those last two words in there is they're highly competitive. This one tells you that they're really focused on time, but notice they're pushing towards results. So how would one of these guys fire you? They do it like this. Come in, don't sit down, your number's up. Just like that. That's how they do it. Let's talk about builders for a second. Builders want a recognition and appreciation. That's their mental kind of focus. Vocally, they're fun-loving, they're spontaneous, they speak very expressively and continuously. There's a reason for that, which we'll talk about. They'll make direct eye contact, but they may look away intermittently. They often, even though the law says no touchy, they'll often touch you when talking. Sometimes they just can't help it. They may touch your shoulder or the back of your arm or touch your forearm or your hand. And usually they'll use their entire body to speak. So they'll really, gesture while they often do what I call T-Rex arms, where they'll put their arms up like in a T-Rex arms position, and they'll move them and draw pictures in front of them like in a box. That's the kind of stuff they do. So verbally, what are their verbal cues? They're very expressive, and they often speak in terms of analogy. But these are some of the terms you'd hear them use. Sweet. Oh, fabulous idea. I'm feeling like, we ought to cover our bases. Hey, don't sweat the details. I want you to dazzle them and baffle them in that presentation. Oh, perfect. Awesome. Hey, give me the big picture here. That's big time overrated. So I was coaching a gentleman who was a big time builder, and I said to him one day, so tell me, how you doing? And this is what he said. Just listen to how he said it. Oh, wow. Really? I just got to say that my gosh, it's like there's an elephant sitting on my chest. That's, how he'd talk by way of analogy. So how would a builder fire you? Here's how. Come in. How you doing? Well, I'm glad you're here. I just want you to know that you're going to have a chance. Yes, a real chance to use your skills at another organization. Thank you. That's what they would do. All right, let's talk about our connectors. Remember that connectors are 39% of the population. These are the folks that are often quite quiet. Their mental focus is on peace and harmony. Vocally, they're warm and reserved, but they're often very soft-spoken, and they'll speak quietly. They'll make little, if any, eye contact. Often they'll look down or around, but not meet your face with their eyes. They really like their personal space, sometimes as much as 2 arms length. They'll use gestures, but they're often very diminished, if you want, or very casual. Okay? So notice what I'm doing. I'm giving you the clusters. I'm giving you the mental, the vocal, and the visual characteristics of these styles so that you can identify these people quite readily. Here's their verbal cues. This is the kind of stuff that really identifies them. Could you explain that to me, please? Now, the reason they would ask that as a question is because they are perfectionists. So they really want to make sure they've understood so they can get you exactly what you want. I'd like to hear your ideas first, then I'll respond. Now, why would they do that? They're very conflict averse. And so if they heard your idea and your idea was not like their idea, do you think that they'd respond? I hope you get, no, they would not. Let's not be in a hurry. Let's consider others' feelings. So they're very much concerned with others, their feelings, how they're doing. So you can see how what's next would really identify them as probably naturally some of the best communicators and listeners there are. I'd like to hear everyone's ideas. Well, what do you think? What does everyone else think? Well, you know what? We always do it like this. Now, the reason they would say that is they don't like change. So if you're going to change something on them, you increase the likelihood that perhaps they won't do something right. So they might say that. And they'll use words like the group, the team, my team, because to them, people and the team are very important. So how would a connector fire you? Here's how. Come in. Sit down. How are you doing? Why do I ask? Well, they wouldn't do it. They couldn't do it. They might say, I'd like you to go speak with Mrs. Jones in Human Resources, but because they value individuals so highly, they would have a difficult time basically firing you. Okay? Let's talk about discoverers. Discoverers are the analytical types, remember, 30% of the population. So mentally, these guys want precision and expertise. They love to demonstrate their expertise. How do they speak? What's their vocal qualities? They speak very deliberately, and they ask a lot of questions. They often will look away when thinking. So if you were to look a discoverer in the eye and say, can you tell me 3 things you've learned in our webinar today? They'd look away and look to the left or to the right or look down, but they wouldn't make eye contact when they were thinking. That's the dead giveaway. They like their personal space, usually an arm's length, not as far as the connectors. But when they speak, they use no gestures. Their hands are often to their sides. So those are the 3 visual characteristics. So what are they like when it comes to speaking? What are the verbal cues? They may say, well, what's the problem? Whose idea was this? Give me the data. Well, what do you want to do? Oh, that'll never work. And by the way, when you don't agree with them, they often become very, very, very cynical. That's why they'd say, well, that'll never work. What's the plan? What happened? Why? I need more information. This is not even logical. So how would a discoverer fire you? Here's what they would say. Come in, sit down. You'll notice there's two pieces of paper in front of you. If you'll turn over the first piece and look carefully, you'll see listed there all your goals for the last 6 quarters. Turn over the second piece, please. Notice those are the goals that you didn't meet in the first column. In the second column is what it cost us to not meet those goals. And in the third column is basically the lost costs that were accrued by our customers by our not meeting their goals. If you'd like, you may take both those pieces of paper with you as you go to human resources, where they will outsource you immediately. Thank you for coming. So that's the discovery. So the question you guys have is, well, who is who? So I've set this up so we can watch a video for fun. This is Keith. This is Lisa and Tanya. This is Bill and Isaac. And they, for the most part, there's 2 that have the same style. I'm going to play it. See if you can identify who is what style. Right? Here we go. Let's have some fun.
Thanks for coming in, everyone. I've been discussing the creation of a new company website for at least a month. I want to come up with a completion date today.
Well, isn't a completion date driven by what the
Well, I optimized that to basically
have a payment gateway or
be able to see it, but evidently Isaac is saying, well, what kind of website do you want? Is it informational? Do you want it done by when? We need to make a decision about all these kind of things. What do you want it to do? And then Keith says, well, why didn't you tell us that to begin with? And Tanya now is speaking. She's saying, hey, I think for whatever reason, we should have a website that has a huge sunset on the front with red and orange, and it ought to say, hey, we can help you. And it really ought to knock people's socks off. That's really what it should do. What do you guys think?
I'm with Keith. Okay?
And Bill's saying, hey, can we just make a decision and move on? We don't need to cite these particulars. And Isaac says, well, gosh, Lisa, we haven't heard from you. What are you thinking? And
I don't know.
Lisa's saying, I don't know. You make the decision, and we'll just build it. Just tell me what you want. Watch your eyes. You can see that she only makes eye contact
what do you guys think of my idea?
right there very and then Tanya's now saying, well,
sense?
hey,
Homepage
what do you
for
think
a
my
lot of pages,
idea?
really knock
It ought to
people's
be
socks off.
really fabulous, don't you think? Lots of color.
Depend on what?
Now Lisa's saying, well, that
You
depends
decide the purpose of
on
the
what it
site,
is that you want it to
what
do.
people to do when they come to the site.
Come
And
on,
Bill's saying,
let's just
come on,
pick a
people.
date and be
Let's
done
just make a
with it.
decision and we'll throw whatever money at it we need. I'm sorry that didn't come through. But notice Keith and Bill are initiators because they wanted to get it done. Isaac was a discoverer because he was asking all kinds of questions. Tanya was a builder, lots of color, lots of flamboyance, knock your socks off. Obviously, Lisa was our connector. Not much eye contact, not much participation, looking down. So if you got here a little late, if you'll notice in the chat, there is a link. I want you to copy the link from the chat, put it in your browser, and you'll be able to print off a little assessment. So let me just give you some directions. We're not going to take time in the webinar to do that. But notice at the top it says, please circle or check the items that are important to you in communicating with others. So you just read down through the list and check off what's important to you. Once you've done that, then you can add up your scores in each of the 4 areas: initiator, builder, connector, and discoverer. And you'll get 4 different scores at the bottom. What you'll see is that you'll often have 2 boxes that have higher scores than the others. You'll need to determine which of those is your primary style and which of those is your secondary style. So, you know, you might ask people for some feedback, but it's not uncommon. People will have boxes or checked or items circled in all 4 areas. All 4 areas. They say that only about 12% of the population use 3 styles naturally. So you'll have 2 styles that have a higher score. So I invite you to take that link, get that thing and take it to kind of start your little quest to figure out what your style is, okay? Hope you can identify your style. So how do you do that? This is what we call the expressiveness axis. So notice the connectors and the builders on the left are much more open, and the initiators and the discoverers are much more restrained. And so you can see the differences I've listed. If you wanted to make this really easy, I probably would note orientation. So notice the connectors and builders will often talk about people. They're people oriented, whereas the initiators and discoverers are about task. Probably the second one I'd pay attention to is emotional expression, where the folks on the left, their emotions are much more exposed and displayed, where the folks on the right, they're more composed and controlled. So let me tell you a story. Listen for orientation. When I was younger, I used to get up early in the morning on Saturday and try to get to Walmart to buy diapers before everybody kind of hit. So I was a little late one day and I got there and I had my diapers and I'm in line. The line is long and a guy wheels up behind me and he goes, "Well, how long you been here?" I go, "Oh, about 5 minutes." And he goes, "Man, look, it took her 5 minutes to ring that guy up. And there's 3 people in front of you plus you. Man, that's 20 minutes. I don't have 20 minutes. I need to get to the hardware store and buy some bark. You know, I'm supposed to put bark down and maybe even get to paint the deck today. And the reason I need to have that done by at least 4:30 is because I promised my boys I'd take them to see that Iron Man movie. And oh my gosh, you know, what is the deal?" So notice if you look at the orientation of the story, did that person talk about people or task? Notice he was all about task. I got to do this, this, and this. In fact, he starts telling you his list of things that he needs to do. So that tells us that this person was either an initiator and discoverer. And by the tone of his voice, he was probably a discoverer. But notice, if you listen to what a person is talking about, listen to the contents of their speech, you'll be able to identify whether they're more open and restrained in what they're talking about. So that's one thing you can easily do, is look at expressiveness. The second thing, which is even easier still, is what we call the forcefulness axis. So notice that builders and initiators are aggressive, whereas connectors and discoverers are much more passive, which always interests me because if you put the connectors and discoverers together, they account for roughly 69%, 70% of the population are more quiet or reserved, if you will. In fact, when I give a speech, oftentimes if the room is big, I know that the connectors and the discoverers are at the back of the room. And once I went back there, took the microphone and waltzed back there to talk to them, and there was a woman I wanted to visit with, and I told her I was coming. It was a luncheon meeting. I want you to know she literally got out of her chair and hid under the table until I went back to the front of the stage. So if you look at the different categories that I put here, you got dialogue, tempo, volume, hand gestures, body lean, eye contact, proximity, quantity of talk. The ones that are probably easiest to identify, whether you're standing or sitting at a meeting table, is eye contact and hand gestures. So notice the eye contact is direct and their gestures are emphatic. Where if the people are more passive, their hand gestures will be diminished or under the table, and their eye contact is kind of indirect. And if you put volume with that, loud versus quiet, these are really, really easy to see. So we're back at Walmart. I'm waiting in line. Guy comes up behind me. You tell me what he is. Hey, how long you been here? I go, not long. Oh, I hate this. You know, Walmart, they never have enough checkers. Look over there. There's 3 managers in their little yellow vests. Hey, you guys, what are you doing? Having a meeting? Why don't you man a register and get us out of here? Aggressive or passive? Well, obviously aggressive. So either initiator or a builder. So with the forcefulness aspect, you can just ask yourself, is this person more aggressive or passive in how they communicate? So you just got to notice how they deliver their message, and that'll help you. All right, so how do we connect with these different styles? The first thing I want you to know, that if you don't understand what a gesture means, acknowledge the gesture and ask questions to understand what the meaning is behind the movement. So if I was sitting and talking to one of you and you started rolling your eyes, I would say to you, I just noticed you rolled your eyes. You know, what did that mean? And do you have a problem with the idea I'm sharing? Help me understand. But here's the thing. If you match or adapt to a person's proximity, their eye contact, their gestures, their tempo, and their tone by gently reflecting their behavior to them, they're going to feel comfortable and their brain's going to tell them, hey, it's okay. They're just like you. Now, I'm an initiator for the most part, which means I can look at somebody nonstop and never look away. So if I was talking with you and looking at you and I noticed that you'd make eye contact but look away, I would match that same behavior. Even though I could look at you nonstop, I'd do the same thing you were doing. I'd look and look away and I'd come back. So notice in the picture there, you can see how, I don't know who's doing the matching, but they're looking at each other. They have a forward lean. They both have their hand on their coffee cup. They're both smiling. So there's a cluster of 4 behaviors. Now that doesn't mean you parrot them or you mimic them. You just notice what they're doing. And I think the operative word is gently reflect their behavior to them. And that will help to establish rapport. Now here's the challenge. These styles are often in conflict. So for example, the initiator and the connector are often frustrating to one another. This person wants to get to it. They want it done yesterday. So they barge into the office and they go, where is it? Did you get my report done? And this person's thinking, gosh, you could have at least said good morning and asked me how I'm doing. So this person is often offended by this person. This person, the initiator, is frustrated by the connector who just seems to be too slow. These two frustrate each other. The discoverer and the builder would say, hey, I think we should do this and this. And the discoverer would say, well, why? Where's the data? Well, don't you think it would be great to do this and this? No. Tell me why. So this person is looking for the data. They're looking for the information that would support what this person is proposing. This person doesn't have any because they're a big picture person, lots of great ideas. So this person is thinking this person's full of fluff. And this person, the builder, is thinking the discoverer is rude because they're not acknowledging them, listening to them. All they're wanting is hardcore information. In fact, the data says that 78% of first-time marriages marry opposites. I did. I'm an initiator. My spouse is a connector. And so we often work through our style differences to keep peace and harmony in the home. All right, let's talk about emotional intelligence. You know that emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize your own emotions and the emotions of others and be able to manage those emotions to achieve better results so that you're not acting like the woman on the right. You know that. There are 4 aspects of emotional intelligence. Personal awareness is about what's going on with you. Personal management is your ability to manage what's going on with you. Interpersonal awareness is your ability to recognize what is going on with other people. And interpersonal management are the skills you could use to manage your interactions with that other person to improve the quality of relationship. So I've always wanted to talk about expectations, because notice, you got to be aware of what your expectations are and be able to manage those expectations for yourself and for others. You ought to be able to recognize what another person's expectations are and manage those expectations between you and another person. And that's a matter of style. So let me just talk for a moment about expectations. What are expectations? Really, expectations are personal values. So let me give you an example. Let's say I'm a manager of a team of 10. And tomorrow I want to hold a meeting at 8:10 just for 10 minutes to check in with everybody on the status of a project we're working on together. So I post the meeting and I literally take the opportunity to walk around and talk to everyone saying, you saw my post, can you meet tomorrow at 10 for just 10 minutes? Yes or no, can you be there? And everybody says yes, they'll be there. The next day comes, Friday comes, it's 8:10 and no one's there. Finally at 8:15, one person shows up. And then between 8:20 and 8:25, everybody else shows up. Now, depending on how emotionally intelligent I am, I'm going to probably be frustrated, and I may even be angry, which means I might be short or accusatory or nasty with my folks. Well, why is that? Well, notice my expectation was that everybody would be on time. So what's my value? I may have a value for commitment. I asked everybody if they were committed. They said they were. I asked everybody if we could start on time for just 10 minutes, 8:10 to 8:20. So I have a value for timeliness. And all those people acted in such a way that it violated my expectations. So when you go to basically marry that to styles, it makes sense to say that there is the potential for every one of us to be frustrated by the actions of others because we all have different styles. So once you understand your and other styles, right, what causes a negative reaction, you can clarify your own expectations and the expectations of others and learn to match those expectations with the way that you behave. Does that make sense, everyone? I hope so. So look, when you're dealing with an initiator, here's what an initiator's expectation is. Boy, I'd circle or take a picture of this one because they are big time into time and task. Their time is value to them. They planned it out. They know exactly what they're doing. And tasks are important. So for them, being on time to meetings, meeting deadlines that you've agreed to meet are important. Being prepared to offer solutions. So if something goes wrong, you go into their office, you want to say, we've got this problem and I'm thinking there's two ways to solve it. We could do this or we could do this. Which would you like? Or maybe another. That tells them you're prepared, you've thought it through, you've come with solutions, and they may just say, do number one. They want you to keep your commitments, come with a plan. That's why I said you want them to provide options for solutions. Now, here's the thing with them. I didn't put this in the slide, but I should have. I actually think I need to write an assessment so that we could basically administer that by expectation. But these guys, remember, you want to take them seriously, but not personally, because they'll whip up the finger like that and start pointing or poking. I had a manager who was an initiator, and he literally would get toe to toe with me, whip out that finger and start tapping on my chest. And it, didn't sit well with me. But I had to get past that to hear what he was saying because his delivery was so poor. So those are some of the expectations of initiators. Let's talk about builders. Builders, if you provide opportunities for creativity and interaction, they'll love you. They're very creative people, and so they love to work on creative projects, and they love to interact with others. If you were to put them in a room to be creative all by themselves and never talk to or interact with anybody else, it would drive them nuts. So they like to work with and connect with others. All right, you want to recognize them for the value they create. So speaking to them regularly, thanking them for what they're doing, expressing appreciation for the value they add is a big deal for them. These folks, and boy, I'd write this one down. Allow them to process out loud. They think out loud, and oftentimes that thinking is all over the place. So you let them do it, and then when they're done, ask them questions to help them clarify and you understand. Because they think faster than they speak. So they think that if they've thought it, they've said it. And oftentimes they haven't. So if I understand you correctly, you want me to do A, C, and D? And they go, what? They might go, what? No, I want you to do B, D, and F. And they haven't even mentioned F. So they'll process out loud, but you ask questions to make sure you've understood and at the same time force them to clarify what it is that they're thinking and talking about. Avoid questions that challenge their credibility. So you're not going to ask questions like, where in heaven's name did you come up with that? Which basically is an interesting way of saying you're an idiot, or I don't agree with your ideas. But you might ask them, help me understand the basis for that decision. Or have you done this before? Or do you know somebody who has? Help me understand why you're so passionate about what it is you're proposing. That doesn't challenge their credibility. You're just looking for information. Okay, so there's some of the expectations of builders. Connectors, avoid making them the center of attention. If you want them to lead a team, you need to discuss that with them offline and do everything that you can to help them be successful. If it's really important to you for them to do that. They don't like to be kind of the one in charge or out there in front of everybody else. They love to feel valued as a team member. So anytime they do great work, it's important that you let them know just that you appreciate them. If you give them feedback and it's constructive or negative feedback, you want to make sure that you offer reassurances when giving that feedback, because they'll take the feedback hard and they'll have a hard time giving it up. So if my assistant was a connector and she didn't give me the report on time, and I gave her feedback about how I need the report at 8 o'clock, I'm going to say, hey, you've never done this before. I know you can get this to me at 8 o'clock tomorrow. It's really important that I get it. Will I get it? Is there anything that's getting in the way? Help me understand what I can do to help you be successful. So notice I'm offering reassurances that I know they can do what they need to do and I'm there for them. Keep your commitments to them. They see commitments as loyalty. If you break your commitments, they see you as disloyal. And make sure that you explain any reason for change. Remember, they love to be great at what they do. They love to be perfectionists and get everything to you exactly as you want them. So if you're going to change up something, you need to explain that. So if you're saying, is this clear? And the connector in your team is looking down, you might call them out. Just say, I notice you're looking down. I'm wondering if there's something about what I'm asking you to do that you don't agree with. Please tell me what's going on. What can I do to help you? So that you understand what it is that they're thinking, so that that change will be successful. Okay. When dealing with the discoverer, it's very helpful to create a plan that is organized and logical that they can execute on. You better be prepared with facts and data to support what conclusions or evaluations you're offering, because they may challenge them. And you want them to see that you are prepared and that there is a basis, a logical basis for what you're asking them to do. You always want to make sure you provide them with the needed resources and information they need. I mean, there's nothing worse than giving them a huge task to do and no resources to get it done. Be sure to clarify parameters and milestones. In fact, the reason you want to do that is because if you gave them a large task without doing that, it may totally derail them. So that's why you not only would you want to do parameters and milestones, but divide the information in the process into parts. So for example, if I said to someone, you know, you're in charge of getting that financial forecast for me for the rest of 2022. They may be overwhelmed by that. But if I said to them, look, I want you to list out all the expenditures for the past couple months and forecasted for the rest of the year by month, return on investment. In other words, I want to know what we spent on each activity, and I want to know what the return was for that activity. And then based on that, I want you to give me your recommendation about whether we should continue that activity. So notice what I did. In that process, I divided the parameters and milestones, that project, into milestones, and told them how I wanted them to break it up in terms of the process and the information that I want. And they'll go to town. But if you leave it to them, if there's any questions about it, it may be absolutely, absolutely overwhelming to them. And you don't want to do that, okay? So look, everyone's style carries a specific set of expectations. So just like when we're looking at and trying to identify what somebody's style is, and then deliberately and consciously trying to match their style gently so we can connect with them. If you can deliberately and conscientiously identify their expectations and meet those expectations, then basically you'll avoid any kind of a negative emotional reaction. So this kind of necessitates, in terms of the expectations, what are your own expectations? So if I was trying to do that or identify that, I'd sit down and say to myself, what is it that absolutely frosts me, really gets me upset? And use your own emotional experience to identify what expectations you have that may often go violated. And then I'd share those expectations with the members of your team. Then on the same token, I'd, by style, try to identify what the expectations are of the people that I work with or report to. And if I didn't know, I might ask, which would force them to think about what their expectations are. So then by style, if I can meet those expectations, that will help to establish rapport, make connections, increase our emotional intelligence, you know, between and amongst each other. Now look, just because I violate an initiator's expectations around time and task, the first time I do that, they're probably not going to go off. They may get a little frustrated, but the more you violate their expectations, the greater the likelihood is that somebody is going to lose it and not be emotionally intelligent and lose control. And when they lose control and come after you, you know, then you either have to decide to just take it, or you may lose control in return. And then what happens? The emotion becomes the message. No one hears what one another is saying. So by identifying a person's style, matching that style, and identifying their expectations in your own, and matching those expectations, you can increase the likelihood of connecting, establishing a rapport, and creating engagement. So if we go to our friend, right, Storm and Norman, he's asking me all those kind of questions. Was he aggressive or passive first in terms of forcefulness? Well, he's probably, you know, he was asking questions right out of the blue without even being asked to. So he's probably on the aggressive end. And notice he is doing a lot of asking. How are you going to fix me? Where do these footnotes come? Are you sure you don't know how? Well, you know, what am I doing wrong? You know, he's asking questions about what he's doing, which is task oriented. My guess is he was probably a discoverer. So notice his expectations were that I would give him answers, and he kept asking for those answers. He wasn't particularly over the top. He was aggressive. So maybe he's an initiator. I can't remember. But notice how you used a model to figure out how everyone is. That's how you do it. So look, think about how much better your relationships with people at work and at home would be if you could just understand their style. And you wouldn't have to be offended by a person's style because they were different than you. You can improve the quality of relationships immensely. And you can improve your emotional intelligence by identifying what expectations basically are attached to that style, and try meeting those expectations with the whole idea in mind of improving your emotional intelligence and the quality of your interactions. I hope that will help you. Gives you a lot to kind of work on, but I know you can do it if you will. Thanks for attending. So